All right, so we are now recording. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. And yeah, so Jane was just starting to tell us about the conference they had in April. And I know April, you were there as well, right? Presenting?
Yep,
Sounds like a really good turnout.
I presented on this project.
Yes,
Gave
which
us
is very good.
I had handouts.
Any feedback or anything? Was there any discussion or anything like that?
Early, so by the time April was presenting, it was towards the end of the second day, and the weather was gorgeous. It was 75 and sunny both days, and we're at the farm, and there's a giant garage door that's open. People were wandering away. I hate to say it, by the end, it wasn't just her; it was happening to all the later presentations. But early on, I will say, the day that April was not there, there was a lot of interest, and people were very excited about it. So yeah.
We got to meet some of the people that we met on this group. So Ray Moranis was there,
yeah,
and
nice.
James, the bee guy.
James Hung, Dr. Hung, yeah, he's wonderful. And you just met with him about, he said that anyway, I just was communicating with him, and so you would know all about that. Yeah. Possible new project.
And what was that lady? There was another lady that I met through this group that we had gotten. Was she with the state or with TNC or somebody? I'm trying to remember what I see her face because I met her at lunch.
Was it Kristen Baum? Or no? Or oh, that one from TNC. There's Stephanie Jordan, the pollinator outreach coordinator, and she didn't present, but she was there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There were some faces that I actually got to meet in person after all our virtual meetings.
That's awesome.
So anyway, that was all good. Yeah.
Excellent. Do you have any events coming up in the summer?
Yeah, so we've got in 2 weeks we're doing an invasive species workshop, and then the day after that, in partnership with BIA, we're doing a drought workshop, and then the week after that we're doing a native plant propagation workshop, and then June is a bunch of activities with tribal youth, and so we'll be incorporating phenology into that, of course, and then our next big conference won't be until September, and that'll be another big 2-dayer. So yeah, but it's gonna be busy. Everybody's trying. Well, I got to say, for myself anyway, I've got several grants that are ending this year that we already took 1-year extensions on because of COVID, and now it's like, holy smokes, how are we going to get all of these events in these last few months? It's kind of like, but anyway, it's good. Yeah. It's nice to see the world open again. And there's a certain energy that comes from being live in person, that it's really nice. So
yeah. Oh, that'll be some good in-person time.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just keep going around if anyone has any updates to share, or I don't know, have we met Emily? And Travis is a new person on the call as well. So yeah, anything you want to share about, things related to this project or to pollinator restoration in general that you want to share, or just like things that are happening right now with phenology or with the weather where you are. Maybe we can just kind of popcorn it around. April, did you want to share anything else?
I mean, I can. So Jane mentioned we have our solicitation out for the next year's funding. And so I think we're still waiting. Did you hear back from Marina of whether? Yeah, so we're waiting if we got physical 23 funding, and so still waiting for the numbers to come down. But the solicitation is open for this next year. So SOIs are due May 31st. And so we met with a couple of scientists that I met at the CHAP conference. So James Hung is a bee scientist, but he works with another researcher, Jeremy Ross. And so they're submitting this concept of what they call septic gardens as a climate adaptation option, and they're wanting to include culturally significant plants and work with tribes. And so we're going to submit an SOI on that, and so there might be some nice, leveraging and continuing some of the work in different ways on that. As far as I've got lots of things coming up this year, but one of the things that I know that I was going to do, I've really enjoyed the National Phonology Network education resources. And so we have added those to our closet of things. And so we have a climate education workshop in July, and I'm going to have Kate Rotler, who I've mentioned a few times, is now in New Mexico and has a background working with the Bosque group. And so she's going to do the phonology education outreach materials at that workshop. And so educating people about phonology that leverages supports you guys. And so we always print off those activities as well and give out to the teachers and to the families so they can take home and do some of them at home too. And the butterflies are a big hit too. And so we have lots of butterflies. So
That's awesome. I'm so glad that the education resources are useful. We're actually working on an improvement to that too on the new website that we're hopefully rolling out soon. We keep saying soon, and it'll probably be in the next month or so. Hopefully that's not too optimistic, but we're going to have a more easy way to search for education resources, and we have a student who's been translating a lot of them into Spanish as well. So it'll be easy to like see which ones are in both languages. So yeah, we're excited about that in the future.
I wonder if there's an opportunity to partner on some indigenous curriculum or, language with that, right? Like native words for butterfly or whatever that is, or different plants and things like that. So something to think about.
Yeah, we have thought about that a bit, right, Alyssa, with adding different names to our profiles that we have per species on the website. We can list multiple common names because a lot of things have many names. And we've talked about putting some indigenous names for things.
So we have nice, we've worked with researchers for native entomology and words and things and use of insects. And I should probably share that to you, Jane, just as examples, if there would be an interest in partnering on something. But just to share, Teholchik is butterfly in Chickasaw, so I at least know that one. So.
It's cool.
So one of our new staffers we've got on board full-time now is Ryan Hill, and he's a Yuchi language instructor. He was a Yuchi language instructor for 10 years. And he gave this fabulous presentation on why language revitalization is a really important part of climate resilience. And anyway, it was a fascinating, wonderful presentation. So anyway. So yeah, we'd love to incorporate more of that in. So
I'll just also share, someone just shared this with me today, the School Gardens Almanac based in Tucson with language and it's like food recipes and seasons and seasonal rounds and stuff. And it's lovely. Cool, inspiring example.
Great. Should we just I'll go through, Rob, do you want to give any updates or share anything?
Sure, I can share a little bit. Spring is finally here in the Northwoods. There are still a few patches of snow out in the woods, but for the most part, we're snow-free and ice-free finally. It was a really long winter, and we've been out on our phonology project now twice a week, and everything's happening so fast we can barely keep up with it. We went from no leaves on anything to sugar maples and birch and basswood just popping leaves, popping flowers like crazy. So it's really fun being out there and seeing it happen like in front of your face. Our climate change program just released the second version of our vulnerability assessment. I shared links with you, a bunch of you folks, so hopefully everybody's sharing it around and getting a good look at it and seeing what we're doing up here in the Northwoods. And the only other news I really have is a bunch of us will be coming down to visit Oklahoma in October, courtesy of April, to do a tribal adaptation menu workshop in Chickasaw country. So it'll be cool.
Awesome. I don't know if we have that link ready. I was looking for it to share that in the chat too. Do you have it, Alyssa?
Yeah, I can forward you that save the date for that workshop. And we
Oh,
have
yeah.
Jennifer Bryant, Jane, is putting together a pretty good sized culturally significant plants group for that workshop that Rob's coming down for. So it's been really exciting to see her take the lead on that.
Yeah, I like her a lot. She's, she had big shoes to fill, you know, taking over that job. So, but yeah, I think she's very nice and a lot of energy and enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh, I didn't.
thank you.
I didn't send it to everyone.
Oh, yeah, thanks for putting that in the chat. Yeah, that's, congrats, Rob, on getting that out. That's, it's an impressive report. So thanks for sharing it around too. Let's see, how about Gail? Do you want to share anything?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. We're past spring. It's hot here today. Humidity is high, so short weather for sure. A couple of things. I went out to Pestle River Audubon Center, and they started monitoring their buttonbush. So I was kind of excited to see it because I've never seen it where there's bare, and now it's just almost close to flowering. So that I'll be curious to see what Alicia has to say about, you know, our area and the plants in a little bit. Recently, you know, I don't know if you've had Gina speak about her work in Louisiana. I've kind of backed off on that for Time to Restore, but I'm still real involved in other areas. We had a great turnout for a National Wildlife Refuge group. I think it was in spring, and then we had an Earth Day event and a couple of things down in Louisiana. So things are still moving, and we look forward to finding out more about what's going to happen. So good to see everybody today.
Emily, you want to share anything? I don't know if we've all met you. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, I don't, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I was having some connectivity problems, so I kept moving from room to room, and I was like,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
missing
no, we can hear you
everything.
fine.
All right, perfect. So I'm Emily. I'm a postdoc at Oklahoma City Zoo. Rebecca is my PI, and she's out of the country, and she asked me to hop on the call because she hasn't been able to be on some of the calls lately. But I study butterflies and milkweed, and I've got a big data set looking at the phenology of milkweed. So I just kind of all felt like I should hop on, and I recognize so many of the names from Ray Moran's and James Hung. So it feels like I know a lot of you already without actually having met any of you. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your work on your phenology. What kind of information are you collecting on the milkweeds?
Yeah, so it's been part of a data set. I started it with my doctorate degree, but it wasn't actually part of my dissertation. So it's just been this data set I've been collecting over the last 5 years now.
Nice.
And I've gone to different properties in Oklahoma. So TNC preserves and wildlife management areas and roadsides. And I've been recording what stage of milkweeds and common milkweed, or not common, viridis, Asclepias viridis, which green antelope horn milkweed, I think is what its normal name is. But so I think I have something like, I don't even know, 5 years. It's like 10,000 lines of data of dates and what stage it's in. So I'm just now starting to dive into it and figure out how to analyze it and how to get it published eventually. But yeah, so I've been just kind of looking at it on the side this whole time. So
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll I didn't say at the top, but we're going to be sharing some results of some of the analyses that Alyssa's working on. And we've come up with a process of finding both the onset, the end, and then the peak in flowering timing with phenology data and the way that we collect it. So yeah, we can share more about that, and then some kind of preliminary climate drivers analysis as well. So yeah, it would be great to find out if it kind of lines up with what you're doing, and maybe even get some of your data would be awesome too for this project. Cool. Let's see, I think Travis, You're next on my screen.
Hi, yeah. I'm Travis. I'm an astronomy undergrad at University of Arizona. But I'm interning for Alyssa, doing a lot of like the coding work for this project and then some other ones later on. My current task is like making some of the little heat maps, but yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gina?
Hello, everybody. I am also having connectivity issues, so let me know if anything is going on wonky with my audio or video, but nice to meet all of y'all that I have not spoken to before. I'm the Louisiana State Coordinator for Time to Restore, and we've had a super busy spring, a lot going on. So most recently, we had an Earth Day event at the preserve. I'm also a contractor for the National Park Service at the Barataria Preserve in Louisiana. So we have a bunch of teacher partners that will bring their high school students and college students to the preserve for citizen science activities. So we ran a teacher's workshop for Nature's Notebook and had some kids come out with their teachers to do practice data collection. We also had a Spring in the Swamp event where I gathered a lot of interest in participating in Nature's Notebook Time to Restore activities. And Moncus Park in Lafayette recently joined us as a phenology monitoring site. So I have on the 31st a volunteer training with their pretty engaged regular group of adult volunteers who are going to come and do the first data collection session. Nichols State University in Thibodaux also has established a phenology monitoring site, and they're waiting for a lot of their Cajun prairie plants to come up and get things identified before they start monitoring. We've also been working with the United Homa Nation to get a phenology monitoring site set up at their administrative headquarters, which has been a bit of a slow process because we're soliciting starts of native plants, and a lot of the local growers have just needed to wait for stock to come up and grow enough. But it looks like as of yesterday, there's some developments on that. So that's exciting. Hopefully we'll have another meeting very soon and then get plants in the ground, get started with that. And the last thing, oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. Did they hire an ag coordinator at the United Homa Nation or not yet?
So they were still looking, but it's
Okay.
been a couple of weeks since I've touched base with them, so I can reach out and kind of see where things are now that I have more information about the plant start sourcing.
Cool. That's really cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm super excited, and they seem very engaged and excited as well. So the last thing that we have going is right after this meeting, I'm hopping on with Sarah Matthews, a botany professor at LSU, who has been working really, really hard to get LSU involved with the project as well. And she found a spot on campus that was planted as a native plant garden many years ago and sort of forgotten about. So we're going to go out there sometime next week, I think, and assess what they have, assess what they'd like to install, and then get a phenology monitoring site going there with a lot of their graduate students and students who stay through the summer. So that's about it for me, but lots of fun Louisiana things in the works. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much new activity there, and it's just great that you've been able to contact so many people and get so many people on board. So thank you.
Yeah, we've been very lucky. There's a very robust native plant gardening community in the greater New Orleans area that's been able to help me a lot in connecting with folks who might be interested. So pretty pleased about how it's been going.
That's great for LSU. So LSU is part of the South Central CAS. She's one of the consortium members. And so if we do get funding for the next round, it'd be great to bring them in.
Yeah, Dr. Matthews has been extremely enthusiastic, and she has several graduate students who are very interested in helping do the regular monitoring on an ongoing and bi-weekly basis through the summer. So that was our big concern with working with universities, is that the population of people who might be able to do the monitoring would ebb and flow, you know, when school is out. But fingers crossed, it looks like everything should go well.
Awesome. Was there, I know before you said that there was a potential connection between Nichols State where they might be trying to give plants to the Homa Nation. Is that still going on? Have you heard anything about that?
So I reached out to several of the faculty members who were at that initial meeting about that and didn't receive responses from any of them about it. So that would be something I should follow up on. But I, after not receiving responses, sort of turned to the local native plant growing community just to kind of expedite the process, because I don't want to keep the Homa Council waiting for longer than I have to. But yeah, it didn't pan out is the short answer for that. Okay. But there are options.
Yeah. To have other options. Oh, thank you. Let's see, Jenny Hoffman.
Yeah, hey there. this is my first time interacting with this group, and
welcome.
Thanks. And I heard about this meeting from a postdoc who's working on a project that I'm peripherally involved with, doing a sort of vulnerability assessment to inform pollinator gardens and restoration along the eastern seaboard. And the focus had been on the plants, but with conversations, we've obviously recognized that if you care about pollinators, you don't just want to know what's happening with the plants, you want to know what's happening with the pollinator plant interactions, and timing of specific events like flowering and fruiting. So when the postdoc forwarded notice about this meeting and how you'll be talking about climate drivers for flowering and fruiting, I was like, woo, yay, I'm going to sit on that.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And where are you located?
I am located in outside of Seattle in the Puget Sound region.
Great.
Yeah.
But Jenny's been a part of the CAST network for forever. She taught me a lot of what I know, and we've brought her in for other things to Oklahoma and with tribes too. So
nice.
Small world. Welcome.
I know. I was excited to see you. Yeah, and I'm a super fangirl of the casks, and I have various other. Yeah, I'm a independent consultant. I have various projects going on with some other casks as well. So
great, awesome. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thrilled to be here.
And then I think Julie, did you want to say anything? Whatever you like, any updates, or we were just kind of going around and saying either project related updates or pollinator restoration things, or just like general updates on what's happening with phenology in your area.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the meeting, and I'm sure Gina provided a good update. So I'll just leave it at that. That whatever Gina, I'll catch up with her later. Thanks, you all.
Okay, yeah, sounds like a lot of stuff going on in Louisiana, so we did get a good update from Gina. All right, thanks. Okay, so Alyssa, do you want me to share slides now, or did you want to?
That sounds good.
Okay, I will. Those. Oops. Sorry. Window. Okay. Presenter mode on Google Slides. Try to view slideshow. Okay. So we went through our introductions and partner updates. So I think we can move on to the data analysis update. So this is just our timeline. You probably have seen this in every call we've had, just kind of like where we're at in our project timeline. So we are in the second year of our first phase here of Time to Restore, and we're still doing data collection actively, as you've heard our partners talk about in the different states. There's still lots of data collection going on, but we've recently started doing more of the synthesis of information phase as well, and so that's what Alyssa is going to be sharing about next. And our plan is to continue this for the next couple months, and then officially this phase 1 wraps up at the beginning of September. So we'll be putting out the deliverables that we've been kind of starting to show you all at that point, and then getting feedback. And we're hoping that we'll have another phase 2, if we're able to get additional funding from the South Central CAST. So we're still waiting on word, as April mentioned. They're still waiting to hear about their funding. So stay tuned on that, and we will definitely let you know as soon as we hear anything.
Maybe it's worth saying too, that that synthesis of information, like what we have planned, is one info sheet for each state in the region, and then one ArcGIS story map for the whole project. Is that right, Erin?
Yeah, and then the state level info sheets will also have kind of like a site level example as well of what the data looks like at a single location, but they'll be summarized for the state, and we'll be including some like broader information that we've shared about in past calls about kind of the climate projections for the region, going down to the state level on those, and then also like what we've learned from the literature on changes that have already been found in the phenology of these plants. So yeah, and then we'll have the detailed information on the flowering and fruiting phenology that we're going to share next on those info sheets as well.
Yeah, and so then this next slide too is also one that we have to remind ourselves every time. I think it's good why we're doing this. So the goal of our data collection is to support pollinator restoration with basic information on plant phenology. When does flowering start? When does it peak? How long does it last? And what about seed ripeness? And then we also wanted to start in this first phase to look at what predictors of phenology we could find. So yeah, moving on to the next slide. So through those workshops that were in the fall of 2021, we working with the 4 states, we came up with this list of 8 priority species for the region, and we've been trying to galvanize data collection around these species. So most of the results are about these, although Erin and I also went back to that spreadsheet and picked out an additional 8 that had a good number of votes, thinking that we could synthesize data because there's many species that have other observers around the country collecting data, so we can sort of opportunistically get a little bit more of a picture of some of the other ones that were also important. Next slide. So this is that picture. This is the, I guess we said there's 14, I think there's only 14 species on here. So I don't know, we have to look back at that and figure out what happened to the other 2. Maybe there were 2 that didn't have data available. So these are either the top 8 that we already decided or the opportunistic next 6 or 8. So there's a lot of silver maple data that was important in New Mexico as a, I think it was New Mexico as a pollinator support. And then the next, and it's open flowers is in pink and ripe fruits is in blue. So you can see that we have the most data maybe going through swamp milkweed. And this is after I've sort of filtered out data where there wasn't a prior no before the yes, outside of longer than 14 days for the whole period that we potentially have data for. Okay, next slide. And so we've seen these before. I had these in that survey, but the idea here is these are these heat map calendars which show the proportion of yes records for each week of the year. So giving you kind of a sense of what that bloom period is and allowing you to, maybe compare species with very narrow windows like the showy milkweed to species with longer windows like the button bush, and for finding fall flowering versus spring flowering plants. The prior slide was data for the whole country, the whole period. For these heat maps, this is blocked down to the South Central region for the last 6 years. And I think we're picturing for the info sheets to do this for each. So there'll be like 5 species for Oklahoma that are only with data collected in Oklahoma to try to get like a tighter pin on what those patterns look like at the state level. Feel free to jump in here, anyone too, anytime we can start to be sort of talking about these and hearing what you think about the direction.
And this is open flowers, right? For this one?
Yes,
yeah.
That would have been a good thing to write on here.
Yeah.
You could go to the next one. Okay, so then this is the driver's part. I've been this is actually a, I'm Doc Tusi, who's a leader in Rising Voices, which is a group that brings together Indigenous and Western scientists. He was talking recently about how he doesn't like mechanical metaphors for the human body. Like, you don't fix it. It's not like a car that you take to the shop. And that we have too many mechanical metaphors. And then I turned around and looked at like all of the phenology literature, and I was like, gosh, like drivers is such a mechanical and kind of like masculine like as if the ecosystems are a machine. So I've been struggling with that a little bit and exploring other, like, is it cues is kind of a theater analogy. Like, it's like, that's my cue and now I bloom. So just kind of thinking, I've been thinking about that lately. But in the proposal, we called this the climate drivers part. So that's also still stuck in my head. Anyways, the key question is, can we identify the climate variables that are good predictors of the onset of open flowers and peak flowering, as well as the duration of peak flowering in these priority species? And so what we've done is cleaned up and formatted the data, figuring out how to calculate peak from the intensity records, looking at conflicting records where different observers or the same observers had made a different report, and requiring this prior no within 14 days. So we're really, we know the uncertainty around that onset. It wasn't just that someone saw something flowering, it was that they saw that it was not flowering and then that it was. So we know that was the beginning of flowering. And then it created linear mixed effect models with the individual phenometrics data, using site as a random effect because we expect plants at the same site to behave similarly, but we're not really interested in the effect of sites. We just want to control for it. And then as the drivers, as the cues, I considered all the available day met seasonal variables. So minimum temp, maximum temp, precip for each season. And I wanted to note that the fall temperature and precip variables are the preceding fall. So the fall before the spring or summer flowering is what is being used there. Any thoughts or questions on that? You can go ahead. So these are prelim results, but what we're seeing so far, so this is for Eastern purple coneflower, 58 site years to look at, and we're seeing an advancement of almost 5 days, plus or minus 2.2 days per degree of spring minimum temperatures. And summer minimum temperatures also fall out in the model, also play a role. The onset of peak flowering moves forward as well, but not as much, 3.6 days, plus or minus a day and a half per degree of spring maximum temperature, with summer max temps also playing a role. And then no predictors fell out for the duration of peak. And then I also looked at.
Yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to pause to see if
yes,
anyone had any like questions about what this means or kind of like how to interpret it or anything.
And also whether it aligns with what you would expect. Like, is this, I'm not on the ground in that region. Like, does this seem reasonable or does it seem not like what's probably happening?
One observation that I would add, Alyssa, on that is that looking at averages versus outlying events. And so that's what I'm saying on the ground here is, is that from year to year, it's just like, okay, so like, this year irises are, a full 3 weeks different than they were last year, and so it's, so one of the things, one of our presenters, I think it was actually Dr. Ross at the thing, was talking about, the whole thing when we talk about climate change and talking about averages, and it's like being in a pit of gravel and trying to find the average size rock, and so I don't know if this matters or it's relevant, but it's just what we're seeing is more extreme events. So it's not any consistent thing. It's like some years now it's horribly late and some years it's horribly early, but it's definitely disrupted. So anyway, that's just my weird observation on the field here. So
no, that's totally right on. And I mean, I think we've seen that with lots of, like, our spring index too. The long-term trend that you can attribute to climate change is really small. It's like a day per decade. But the interannual variation is on the order of weeks. And I think part of the reason that we think about the means has to do with what we know about the future, like the projections for 2040 50 or 2080, we don't know what the earliest spring, what the latest spring is going to be necessarily, but we know what the average spring is going to be. Although we could ask Adrian about that and maybe try to dig into like what's the warmest spring we can expect, and then process that through a similar kind of model and ask like what's the earliest you could expect to see flowering onset and what's the latest, like something around the range, I think makes a lot of sense. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. And even like, what is the final frost date going to be now? You know, because if you're thinking about putting plantings out there and you don't want to put tender plants out, you know, and then because we're having these bizarre late hard freezes, you know. We did that last year. It was like end of April or beginning of May, and we had a hard freeze, and it killed even so many of the native plants out in the field that should have been adapted for this. And we saw they were being killed also. So anyway, so I would just, for me, as somebody who's out there, whatever, on the field doing this restoration work, I would love to see more data that way, you know, about anyway. So
the extreme, like the range that you might expect to see in future years.
Yeah, that would be really helpful for somebody like me.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I can back that up north here too. I mean, thinking about things like sugar bush starting earlier one year, like really early in February sometimes, and then ending very abruptly when the temperatures go from highs in the 30s to highs in the 80s in a week.
Yeah. Is that are you seeing a shortening of the sugaring season?
In general, I would say yes. There are still some seasons that are nice and long. Last year, there were places that they gave up before the trees did. This year, almost everybody had a 4-day season.
Wow.
And we're seeing, you know, variability in the other plants that we monitor. That's just, you know, we can't tease out like, you know, some of the predictors that you have here yet, because we don't have a big enough data set. But definitely from year to year, there's a lot of variability.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just again, thinking about the application of some of this information to guide on the ground restoration work. So, you know, we've got final frost, the last frost happening later, but then drought is happening earlier and more severely. So, you know, again, thinking about what Rob was saying, you know, the window of time is shrinking on these things in a different way. But, you know, okay, can't get these plants out too early, but we really can't dally on this because it's going to be hard drought coming in so soon. So, and you want them to have a little bit of a chance or not have to do quite as much watering before you put them out there. So anyway, things are different, which is, I guess, why we're all here, right? But it's something.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that comes to mind when you're saying that too is the compression of the resource wave is something that people are talking like that. That's exactly what you're saying. Like there's just less of a window, like a shortening shoulder season, shortening spring is, you know, less of a window of resources for pollinators or sugar. So maybe thinking about it that way and trying to look at this data with that compression idea in mind. I'm not exactly sure even what I mean by that, but I think that could be cool.
No, it is. And I mean, outside of the academic community, you don't hear people talking. I mean, you hear lay people talking about that, like, wow, this is weird and it's having an impact. But just that concept of articulating it that way and thinking about compression of events and all that, it's just something I don't hear people talking about quite that way. And I think it's an important part of the conversation. And just think, you know, it's kind of like when people made the switch from saying, oh, it's global warming to it's global climate change. You know, it's a matter of just understanding that you can't poo-poo it. It's not just universal warming. We're not just going up 3 degrees, whatever. It's a lot more complex than that. And you all know that, but how do you get that information out to people and make it useful and also make it persuasive so that they can prepare or adapt, whatever it is people need to do? you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and again, we saw it, in Oklahoma, we have very extreme climate. I mean, our baseline is insane, for normalcy here, but out here on our prairie, we saw last year with that late killing freeze, and then with the horrible drought, all the natives that should have been well adapted for this couldn't even, it was just a mess. So anyway.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
anyway, off my soapbox. You can go back to your presentation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on a
No,
rant.
it's great. I much prefer it like this, like a conversation.
Yeah, and one other thing we could do is with the info sheets, we could include that in the climate projection section, like not just saying how the temperatures or precip is expected to change, but those like the last frost dates and then the drought timing, if they have any information about that, we can summarize that as well.
Yeah.
Should we move to the next one?
Yeah. I have three of these species that I've looked at so far. So then buttonbush is like a similar effect, 4 days plus or minus 1 day per degree of spring minimum temperature. Spring minimum temperature also came out there. I'm gonna mute that person. I mean their dog. The peak onset for this one did have a driver of 2 days. Although it's a variation's really big, plus or minus 2 days. So it's, down to 0 per degree of spring minimum temperature increase. These are all maybe not so clear, but spring, the warmer the spring, the more the advancement in onset and peak onset. And then duration, they didn't have a predictor fell out. And this is fewer records that we're working with. Thoughts on this one? You can look at the last one and then kind of try to do that connection to the projections.
Mm-hmm.
So then Monarda, the wild bergamot, this one was fall. This was a different story. It was fall precip, although it's not a very big effect. It's a day per centimeter, plus or minus 0.4 of a day. For onset, peak onset, nothing came out. But then peak duration, it's a very small effect. It's 0.2 days per centimeter of increase in fall precip and 1 day per degree Celsius of spring min temperature. So it seemed like a combination of fall rain and spring temperature that was driving peak in the wild bergamot and just rainfall in the onset of flowering. I think I said that for all of these, I didn't limit it to the region. I took data from across, like that's the good thing about our standardized situation is that, we have data from all across the country for the same phenophases, same species. And I tested in all of the models whether latitude had an effect, like whether the relationship changed at different latitudes, and it didn't fall out for any of these species. So this we could maybe assume that these are preliminary results, still like getting to the bottom of everything, but generally it looks like it wasn't like 5 days at lower latitudes and 2 days at higher latitudes or the inverse or anything, that the effect is not changed by latitude. Does that make sense? And then, so thinking about that first 1 day per centimeter of increase in fall precip, this is, if you go to the next slide, we're going back to like fall of 21, where we were talking about these great climate projections that the South Central Cask and Adrian Wooten have made. We can sort of, the idea, what we're thinking to sort of do, not analytically, but like conceptually for the first phase of this project, is to tie together those results in the projection. So if you're looking at like maybe on the right, it's these are the RCPs. So it's the highest, the worst case scenario, 8.5, and on the lowest, and on the right, it's the lower scenario. So we're expecting to go somewhere. We're on track to be in between these two scenarios. And precip is very trickier to model than temperature. But bearing all that in mind, we might expect to see a drying in central Texas in the worst emission scenario. And that drying might be like, maybe we're seeing from 1 to 4 centimeters of drying across Texas, central Texas. And that drying might lead to a 1 to 4 day delay in flowering onset in wild bergamot. But like, as Jane says, these averages, they also might not sound like that much, but then, you know, like in your driest spring, you might see a 2 or 3 week delay. And in your wettest spring, you might see, you know, a strong advancement. So I think it does make a lot of sense to try to pin down not just the average future conditions, but what the interannual variability will look like down the road. Maybe going to be both, maybe currently and in the future. I think that's everything that we wanted to share with you all in terms of like the pieces that we're starting to be able to pull together to like meet what we sort of framed out, which was taking a closer look at the patterns with the heat map calendars, digging in on what are good, like what are these species responding to in terms of flowering and peak flowering, and like what does that mean, like, you know, what future conditions are we facing?
Yeah, and also the map we're looking at is the mid-century projected change, which is like a range of, what is it, 2035 to 2050, which we felt like was more appropriate for this project than trying to use the end of century, because I know all of you were thinking on a shorter time frame than that. So that's what we're planning on using in the info sheets, is like looking forward to this mid-century, really starting from 2035 to 2050. What might these changes in flowering look like? So if anyone has any just general thoughts on this approach, if there's like, and we already talked about the adding in the extremes, maybe interannual variability, is there anything else that we're kind of missing here or that you'd like to see included? We haven't looked at the fruiting data yet, but we're planning on doing that as well.
Right. Oh. Yeah, Gail was just asking, I guess I can't unmute you. Are the slides indicating, oh yeah, the onset of seeds, right? No, I didn't dig into the ripe fruit or the seed data yet, but that's the next, I'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks. And I can share it however makes sense, definitely in the info sheets, but there's going to be more data. I mean, that's another thing, just for the people who've helped coordinate this too, you know, there's going to be more info than probably we're going to select for the info sheet. So I'm happy to share like the full spreadsheet results. If we do get funded for a second phase, we proposed writing this stuff up in a publication. But if we don't do that, we'll at least, like, if we don't get funded and we don't do that, we'll at least like clean up the results and put a report together.
Yeah, and we could get more feedback too once we have the full set of results, to ask those of you that are the state coordinators to help us kind of decide what to include at the state level, because we'll probably have some, like, a certain amount of data for some species, so we might be kind of forced to only include certain ones. But if it comes down to like a choice between 2 different sites that we want to highlight, or you know, deciding like how many species to put in the community calendar so that it's readable but also includes the species that you care about, we can work with you on that too. And we're planning on really doing the info sheets in June, right? June, July. We're trying to make decisions on that, so we'll be getting back in touch about that.
yeah, it'd be great to hear what you're thinking too, Emily, because that green antelope horn is one of the, it is, right? It's one of our 8 priorities, and it's actually one that we don't have a lot of. It's like at the very bottom of the data, right? Did not even make it on here. I think it's not on, so I don't know, I'll double check, but I think we have very little data for that, so it would be cool to connect, share your work with this group as it emerges, because there's definitely interest.
Oh, sounds good. Okay. Yeah. Anything else, just in general on the project that anyone wanted to talk about? We have a couple minutes left. We're planning on another quarterly call this summer where we'll probably share back the info sheet drafts at that point and get final feedback on those. And then Alyssa mentioned the story map is the other piece, and I'm hoping really with the story map to kind of talk about our process here with the stakeholder workshops and the input that we got and kind of the way we made decisions about the priority species and all that, to kind of tell that story. So
Well, I don't have anything super comprehensive to add, but I just wanted to say thank you for the very interesting and comprehensive presentation. In my capacity, I don't really have my hand in any of the data analysis, so it's really interesting to see the end results of all the work put in on the ground. So thank you again.
yeah, thank you. Thanks for helping to collect the data. And
Yeah, there wouldn't be anything, there wouldn't be anything to say if it wasn't for the on the ground people. Oh, I should say too, I meant to do a demo for today, but I just did not have time. There's a lot of relevant iNaturalist data that we'll visualize too in some of those. I think we'll try to put it in the together with the heat maps, like the Nature's Notebook heat map and the iNaturalist kind of heat map, so that we're using everything that's out there on those species. And yeah, I don't know, Rob, we could talk another time too, but just since there's a lot of the eastern purple coneflower data and a couple of the other species actually comes from the upper Midwest. So I mean, I think, you know, maybe the results could be relevant to some of the work that you all are doing.
Yeah, I've been listening to this and looking at your slides like really intently, going, I wonder what we can do with this kind of thing with the phenology data that we have. You know, how do we bring in some of the pollinator stuff that we're not doing? So it's all kind of swirly right now, but we'll definitely be in touch.
That sounds good. And I'm happy to, like, it's part of the wrap up. I don't think we committed to this, but I believe in shared code. Like my little repository of our code is private, but I'll make it public by the end so that people can see the workflow and use anything.
Well, that's way beyond me, but somebody at Cliffwick understands it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned like the amount of data that you have. We really, I mean, we have pretty good data for this project, but it's not a lot, you know, in terms of number of years. So really, we talked about, I think in the proposal, having like 30 site years, and that's basically like a single site in a single year where you have an onset date, you know, where you have the start of flowering captured. And so it could be like 30 sites in a year, or it could be, you know, a number of years with a few spread out. So it's really, I think it's amazing what Alyssa's done so far, and we were really excited when we first started looking at the results, because it's kind of like what we've been envisioning for the project for so long, and then we finally have something to look at, and yeah, it's just super exciting that we had so many significant models too. Anything else from anyone? Well, thanks for joining us, And yeah, we'll be in touch. We'll send out a follow-up and we will.
I think we're gonna have
another-
one more of these, right? One more
Yeah.
quarterly call in August.
Mhm.
So like kind of fully wrap up or slash re-gear up
fingers
for phase 2 if we get funded.
Yeah.
It's really great to see everybody and hear the updates from around the whole country.
It was great to meet the folks I had not interacted with before.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting us to be a part of this project.
Oh, it's been great.
Of course, yeah. All right, thank you.
Thanks everybody. Travis, if you want to hang on for a second,